Hello, this is my presentation on a reliquary in the form of a miniature sarcophagus from Tang Dynasty China. Going into the Tang Dynasty, for some historical context. Now, the Tang Dynasty was a golden age in Chinese history. The arts, culture, and economic prosperity all flourished, and military conquests were quite successful. It ruled from 618 to 907 AD. And during that time, although there was this brief interperiod where um, the Empress Wu Zetian reigned, and so she sort of had her own time. She sort of had her own like separate period during this time, but for clarity's sake, I'll just group it all together. And Buddhism experienced both persecution and growth at different times during the Tang Dynasty, but Empress Wu Zetian, China's first and only female regent, uh, to be officially recognized, it was known for her promotion of it, as seen by her patronage of public works like the Longmen Grottos. And now getting into the iconography and style. Now, if we go back here, we'll get a much more clear image of this sarcophagus. Now, you can sort of see how despite its sort of rusted, sort of worn out quality, you can kind of see the gold bands at the top, again, hinting a more ornamented nature. This perhaps indicates that whoever died was of noble birth. And it also has the dragon like motif on the sides of the coffin, which I will expand on later, as well as being surrounded by four guards or attendants and a fence like structure. Now, to get into stylistic comparisons, we can see here with the pillar of Asoka from early India that has similarities in their use of animal motifs. You both have like the fierce lion quality and the dragon. So now, again, I'll get into what the dragon means, but the lion sort of had that sort of were sort of symbols of regality and power from Ahsoka's period. So again, both make use of the animal motif. And the guard figures at all four corners of the sarcophagus bear some resemblance to this fierce-looking bodhisattva on the right. Again, you got that kind of which also played a role in sort of guarding spiritual matters, so there is some resemblance also in purpose, perhaps, there too. And what perhaps, though, the most resemblance in purpose, as well as a bit in style, is in the top left hand corner, you have this sort of gray box with what appears to be a procession of attendants carrying a sort of caravan like structure. Now, this was depicting the dispersal of relics, and the sarcophagus contains said relics, which again I will expand on later. So again, both have those same sort of purposes with like this large square structure and the attendants. So you can kind of see how like you have those stylistic similarities between these artworks. And now on to the dragon motif. Oh, by the way, the square is also from the Tang Dynasty of China. The only one that's not is the lion pillar. Now, if you look closely again on the side of the coffin, you'll see this golden, slender, lizard like creature, which again is a dragon. They were common tombs. They were very common on tombs of dead nobles dating all the way back to the Shang Dynasty in 1600 BCE. It sort of somewhat morphed into the lizard we know with the slender body and the teeth and the claws from just sort of simple faces like they were earlier. And interestingly, in contrast to Western depictions, they were often, which kind of Western, in a lot of Western culture, you sort of see dragons as like these flying, fire breathing, bloodthirsty monsters. Well, again, in more Chinese culture, they were sort of viewed as good beasts that would sort of bring rain for your crops, among other things of that nature. So again, they don't have this overwhelming. I mean, sometimes they were sort of negative, but mostly they had a positive connotation with them. Although they might not have had much religious significance to Buddhism, according to this paper from Bethel University, as So, yeah, it might just be for decorative purposes rather than religious. However, others dispute that and say they played important roles as symbols of wisdom and also protective roles in rituals. So, yeah, there's actually a story about either a king or a monk who received protection from a dragon, or nagas as they were called. And now but either way, it's a very cool design. And now we get into the veneration of relics, which was very important in Buddhist China. Now, the relics were sort of were considered part of the Buddha itself, and reliquaries were meant to contain said relics. The sarcophagus is an example of one such reliquary, in that it contained relics, so that was definitely the purpose of the said miniature sarcophagus. And its design, like the more ornamented design of it, kind of shows how they progressed over time from more simple sort of designs in India to the more like refined and elegant designs in China. Again, that probably also had something to do with wealth, since I believe those reliquaries were more in China were more commissioned for nobles. And during China's golden age, since this was the Tang dynasty, they were also relics and reliquaries were also very important for whipping up enthusiasm among the laymen. They tended to get people excited, although most of the time they were housed in pagodas or temples. Now, these also look like they have a more simple grayish design from the ornamented sarcophagus, but you might be able to attribute that to just wear and tear. And now, for an example of such a pagoda, we have Famine Temple that would house these relics and reliquaries. You can sort of see here like these two sort of fierce guard structures down that corridor, and also on the left side, and you can also sort of see a bunch of like golden artifacts on the right. So kind of gives you some insight into what was housed in this temple. Now, this temple doubled as a tomb. That's right. So these relics were often buried with Tang nobles who died, which sort of implies that they were important for which again shows that they were important for death in perhaps a sort of Egyptian way, that they were necessary to carry on to the next life. However, relics weren't necessary to attain Parni Nirvana. So instead, it's perhaps just to inspire people to continue on with your teachings, or continue on promoting Buddhism among the laymen, as these relics were important for that. And interestingly, one of the said reliquaries found in the said temple is a sarcophagus, which goes to show which or a coffin. Well, it's more like a coffin reliquary, but it's very similar to the sarcophagus that I'm looking at, and it kind of could give some insight into what that sarcophagus was used for, which was to accompany people to in their tombs. So yeah, again, the sarcophagus is a symbol of death, so it makes sense that it would be housed in tombs of Tang nobles. And now finally, we get into the stone epitaphs. Now, Buddhism played a major role in the cycle of life and death, but crucially, this was not just for your very high-ranking monks or Tang nobles. It also played a very important role in the life of laymen and your ordinary monks. The stone epitaphs that were excavated from Tang China kind of depict people's lives and deaths as recorded here on these tablets. And again, it kind of showed how important, again, it showed the importance of Buddhism in the cycle of life and death, because of just the abundance of these epitaphs. And also, not exactly related to life and death, but they also discovered many temples around here, which kind of goes to show how widespread Buddhism was. Now, you might wonder, like, what is the resemblance to the sarcophagus here? But again, with the sarcophagus being a symbol of death, and again, we can see from the earlier examples that it was probably housed in tombs of deceased Tang nobles. We can show how the Buddhists thought of death, and you can sort of see that they were interested in recording it. So everything is very documented, as with these stone epitaphs, which kind of show the symbol of people going on to the next life, like the sarcophagus. Thank you.